Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We're very fortunate to have Dr. Jeff Ferranti today speaking on healthcare cyberwar, keeping our patients and our research safe from hacktivists, nation states, and cyber terrorists. So obviously a very timely topic with all of the issues around hacking and data security that are going on. So Dr. Ferranti is the Chief Information Officer and Vice President for Medical Informatics at Duke Health. He's a professor of pediatrics and informatics and is responsible for the vision, strategic planning, and adoption of technology and information solutions within the health system. And he develops overarching informatics strategy in support of the Duke Health mission. He's the leader of, or was the leader of Duke's enterprise-wide Epic installation with 4 hospitals and over 300 ambulatory clinics. And through all this, he maintains an active practice in neonatal critical care at the University Hospital. So thanks a lot for joining us today, Dr. Ferranti.
It's great to be here, and thanks for your attention about a topic that I think impacts our life every day. 5 years ago when we were putting Epic in around Duke, I never in a million years thought that I would spend 40% of my time actively battling hackers and cyber terrorists, but that's where we do spend a lot of our time. And you read about it every day in the newspaper. You read about Yahoo and 3 billion patients' records being stolen. You read about Equifax, 150 million people had their data stolen. And people ask me, what does that really mean? Did they steal my email address? Think about it. Equifax knows every single thing that you buy of any significance is in your Equifax account, as long as as well as your social security number and lots of sensitive data. And so a question that I often get is, why are we seeing so much more of this? Why are we seeing, elections hacked, massive cyber breaches of major companies, foreign nation states, leaks of information happening what seems like near daily in my world, probably weekly for people who are just reading the newspaper. And I think the reason is because we are living in what Thomas Friedman calls the age of acceleration. And have any of you all heard of Moore's Law? So Moore's Law basically says that compute power doubles every 18 months to 2 years for about the same price. And so year over year over year, since the advent of computers, the amount of compute power that we have has been doubling on a biannual basis. And that's a hard concept to sort of understand in your mind. And so Thomas Friedman, this is a great book if you haven't read it. Thank you for being late. He gives this example of the mathematician who created chess. And the king at the time said, chess is a fantastic game. I want to reward you for creating this. What would you like? And the mathematician said, I just want rice to feed my family. Nothing too fancy, just rice to feed my family. And the king said, no problem. How much rice do you want? And he said, well, since you like my chess game so much, why don't we start with 1 grain of rice on the first square of the chessboard, and then double it for each subsequent square. And that's effectively what Moore's Law is. And so you can see you have 1 grain of rice, then 2 grains of rice, 4 grains of rice, 8 grains of rice, 16 grains of rice. It seems pretty manageable. Well, about halfway through the chessboard, I think the king realized he had a major problem on his hands because the numbers accelerate and get bigger and bigger and bigger over time, so much so that by the time you get to the end of the chessboard, all 64 squares, it's 15 quintillion grains of rice. That's enough rice that if you put them end to end to end, it would go from here to Alpha Centauri, which is our nearest star, and back. And that's the power of acceleration. That's the power of exponential growth. And that's what's happening in our world and in informatics. So in 2010, we entered into the second half of the chessboard and in compute power. And so we're not doubling small numbers like 2 or 4 or 8. We're doubling huge numbers, which means the amount of change in compute power between 2018 and 2020 is unthinkable right now. And we're living in that age, and that's what they call the age of acceleration. What happens with exponential acceleration is that, it's the advent of computing in any real way, and you're kind of just sort of teetering along. Somewhere around 2007, a whole bunch of really big things started happening. We got iPhones, we got Facebook, we got eBay, we got Amazon, That all happened in 2007 as compute power really started ticking up. And since then, we've gone into basically this vertical stage of acceleration where the number of CPU transistors per CPU is growing exponentially. And every year, folks say there's no way Moore's law is going to hold for another 2 years, and it holds, and it holds, and it holds year over year over year. And this is the environment in which we're seeing this uptick in cybersecurity events. On the good side, you folks in DCRI are able to do more with data science, more with advanced computing. We have GPUs that can do amazing things. We have our Forge group that's doing amazing things. Some people are using it for good. Some people are using it for bad. Another way to understand this exponential Moore's law is to understand that not everything follows Moore's law. So computers do, but not everything does. So I'd ask you to consider in your head a 1974 Volkswagen Beetle. And it looks something like this. We all kind of know what it looks like. Now, it's probably not a shock to anyone, but Volkswagen Beetles do not follow Moore's law. But if they did, that 1974 Volkswagen Beetle today would go 300,000 miles an hour, would cost 4 cents. And you think about the fact that that would double in the next 2 years. So it would go 600,000 miles an hour and cost 2 cents. And so that sort of growth is what we're talking about. And that's the sort of compute power that our cyber enemies are applying to attack us at Duke. And this is not hyperbole. This is not fear, uncertainty, and doubt. This is a very real thing that we see in very real ways nearly every day at Duke. Someone with a pulse on the other side of a screen actively trying to steal your research data or trying to steal our corporate information or trying to hack into our patient data, and us actively trying to prevent that. So when you think about cybersecurity, we've gone through a lot of different phases kind of in the history of cybersecurity. So back in 2009, to 2010, we were dealing with things like laptops get stolen or left in a an airport, a memory key gets dropped. It was really about lost or stolen devices. And so we tormented everybody and we said, your laptops need to be encrypted. Everybody screamed, my laptop's going to be slow when you encrypt it. Now the compute power is so fast, it doesn't really even matter. You don't even notice that your laptops are encrypted. But that's what we were dealing with back then. 2014, 2015, we started dealing with big hacking events. Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield lost 80 million patients. They just settled, a couple of months ago, $300 million for that one breach. Primera Blue Cross Blue Shield lost 11 million patients. These were hacking events. Hackers hacked into the network, stole data, and then there's CMS fines, there's credit monitoring for all of your patients, et cetera. And now, more worrisome is this advent of ransomware. Where basically hackers come in with sort of a destructive mindset, but also this sort of entrepreneurial spirit that they want to make money from these things. And what they basically do is encrypt all your machines so you can't do any work. And if you want to get into those machines ever again, you pay ransom in Bitcoin to the hackers. Otherwise, you lose all of your data. And so we've gone through this evolution. You can imagine that encrypting an entire health system is a really bad thing. And that's exactly what happened in the UK with the WannaCry attack, which we'll talk about, where basically 25 or 30% of the UK health service was totally shut down. Couldn't order labs, couldn't order blood, couldn't do surgeries, couldn't do x-rays, EHR down, totally down. And they were diverting patients to other hospitals because of a ransomware attack. So who are these people that hack? Well, there's a bunch of different sort of personas of hackers. At the macro level, in the IT security world, it's what we call white hat hackers and black hat hackers. So white hat hackers are cybersecurity experts, the sorts of people we hire here at Duke. They're people who are on our teams helping us understand new techniques that hackers are doing to break into our environment. But they are generally for the good. They're generally employed by academic organizations, the FBI, et cetera. Black hat hackers are hackers for the bad. They are cyber terrorists, they are extortionists, they are folks who are trying to either steal value or wreak general mayhem in an environment. And then you have gray hat hackers who kind of sit in the middle. Maybe they're like a cybersecurity guy by day, but at night they dabble in the dark side a little bit, and so we call them gray hat hackers. They can be nation state actors, and we're seeing this more and more and more. When you hear about, Yahoo being hacked, or UCLA being hacked, or the Democratic National Convention being hacked, those are generally nation state actors. North Korea, Russia, China, organizations within those countries that are hacking organizations. They can be criminal syndicates, foreign corporations, security researchers, what we call script kiddies. So this is like a 14-year-old in Raleigh who goes and downloads, a hacking version of Linux and tries to break into stuff. And then more and more hacktivists. And hacktivist organizations are becoming really common. Have you all heard of Anonymous? Anonymous is probably the most notorious of the hacktivist organizations. They use these Guy Fawkes masks. Their slogan is, "We are anonymous, we are legion, we don't forgive, we don't forget, expect us." That's pretty menacing, right? And last year they started what's called Project Westwind, which is a hacktivist campaign against academic institutions and academic health institutions, where they are actively targeting those sorts of places in sort of this distributed network of hacktivists who have a political statement to make. In this particular case, they're concerned about the rising cost of education, traditional education, and medical education, and want to show organizations that they're not above being hacked and embarrassed publicly, and so they have a group of folks who are trying to hack those organizations. What do they want? Lots of different things. We traditionally have talked about electronic health records, and people say, well, why do you want an electronic health record? Well, it's because if you steal a credit card number, I can replace your credit card number. If you steal an electronic health record, you can't replace your health history. And hackers can do a lot of bad stuff with that. They can do false insurance claims, they can write false prescriptions, all sorts of things to maximize that, and it's something that will never really go away. More and more, they're interested in research methods and results. And so there are entire nation states and subgroups within nation states that we call advanced persistent threat organizations that are out there to steal research results. They don't want to put the time into doing the research themselves, and so they'd rather steal it from us and then use that to forward their research mission. They want to steal passwords, financial information, cyber sabotage, so just break stuff or bring things down, and then just cause general mayhem, as was the case in the WannaCry attack. Why do they do this? It might be for financial gain. It could be for strategic advantage, and we're seeing a lot more of that. Generally, people who attack places like Duke are looking for some research data or some proprietary information that's going on in our labs to give them a strategic advantage in whatever their research interests are. And different people have different research interests, and that's who they tend to go after in the organization. Disruption of your IT services, damage to your brand. So, we often will have websites hacked and then defaced for some purpose, notoriety, and then some people just do it for fun. Now, where do these folks hack? So you all probably, hopefully, live in that top part of the internet, the part above the water, public websites, your CNN, your Google, YouTube, Facebook. That's 2 to 4% of the entire internet, and that's about 8 billion web pages. That is where you spend most of your time. When you go below the surface, you get into what's called the deep web, and that's where index sites are, password protected sites, some sites that sort of live on the fringe of the up and up internet and the rest of it. That's things like MooTorrent and Bitcoin that are becoming more and more popular, but they're not really a big part of the mainstream internet. You have places like the Pirate Bay where you can download hacked software, hacked movies, hacked music. And as you go further down into what's called the dark web, there are parts of the internet that's just not indexed at all. And the only way you can get to the dark web is using a special browser called Tor. These sites don't end in .com or .edu, they end in .onion, and you have to use a Tor browser where you know the URL to actually go to those sites. And this is where drug trafficking, illegal information, contraband sales. You can hire hitmen on the dark web, organ trafficking. This site called Silk Road, which has since been shut down, was basically eBay for controlled substances. You can go on the dark web, you can buy your heroin with Bitcoin, have it shipped to your front door. And that's all happening sort of down here. And then this thing here called the Hidden Wiki is kind of the directory for the dark web. Because sites aren't indexed, there's no Google down there, and so you have to use something to know where they are. And so the Hidden Wiki is something that you can use through a Tor browser to find your way around the dark web. This is where 98% of the internet is. It's 550 times the size of the public web that we all use every day. 7.9 zettabytes, and 1 zettabyte's a trillion gigabytes. There's paywalled sites and databases and things that are there. And that's where hacking secrets are traded as well. That's where social security numbers are sold, credit card numbers are sold, and medical histories are exchanged on the dark web. So what I'm going to do today is take you through 4 critical risks, 4 types of hacks that we need to deal with today. And we have experienced all 4 of these at Duke in the last year or so. We're going to start with phishing. People at Duke are our biggest asset, but they're also our weakest link. And we talk about exponential computer power growth. We talk about Moore's law. There's this vision in everyone's head that these hackers are using super sophisticated techniques to find things out. And while that's true sometimes, one of our biggest vulnerabilities is just our people. Just giving away secrets through phishing-style attacks. Systems can be defended more easily than our people. Phishing is the #1 delivery mechanism for ransomware. When you look at how WannaCry started, took down 25% of the NHS, it was a phishing email. Someone clicked on it, and it caused this malware to propagate across networks of insecure machines. Now, this statistic, 30% of all phishing emails are clicked on. I mean, if I were to ask you all, who here clicks on phishing emails, probably no hands would go up. So we studied it. We looked at it here at Duke. 32% will click on a phishing email at Duke. And now they're taking it into voice calls, vishing. So how many of y'all have gotten weird phone calls on your cell phone? Maybe someone says they're from Microsoft, they're from a vendor, they're from somewhere, and usually end up hanging up. We're getting more and more of those. I get them all the time. Smishing. Sometimes you get a weird text on your cell phone. Someone will ask for some information. And these are all intended in many cases to just gather little bits of information that are put together that will ultimately result in some vulnerability that can be exploited. Now, a lot of folks say, well, DHTS people just block this stuff out, filter out the malware. It's your job to protect us. And you're right. But what a lot of people don't realize is this is a typical month at Duke. Okay, 231 emails flow through our shop, get delivered to y'all. Of those 231 million emails, 176 million of them never make it into your inbox because we filter them out because they're malware, phishing, attackware, things that are going to somehow compromise your system. What actually sneaks through is 55 million emails, which are the things that we think are good emails and actually let through to you. And so when you get one, that's actually a phishing email, it's part of that 55 million. And often what happens is that gets presented back to us or reported to us, sometimes after you click on it. And then we try to block that at the firewall. But that is sort of the exception to the rule. That is the one that snuck past the other safeguards that we have. And those are the sorts of odds that we're dealing with. 176 million to 55 million. Those are tough odds. To protect the organization from. So we use tools like Proofpoint, right? So Proofpoint says when an email ends up in a Duke Outlook mailbox, if there's a hyperlink in there and you click on it, it doesn't go direct to the website. It goes to the Proofpoint server. Proofpoint has threat intelligence from the whole country. It decides if it's a safe link or not. If it is, it takes you to the website. If it's not, it blocks it right there. The problem is, we have people at Duke who forward their email to Gmail, forward their email to Yahoo, forward their email to Hotmail, use other email services here on campus. Well, Proofpoint doesn't protect those. Proofpoint's only protecting our Outlook enterprise email. So there are lots of ways that if you're using tools outside of the standard tools that you can inadvertently click on something and break something here. We had an incident in the cath lab probably 9 months ago where someone was using Gmail. They forwarded their Duke email to Gmail, link came through, clicked on it, encrypted 100 machines in the cath lab. And they needed to be re-imaged. They didn't have any PHI or anything on them, but they were the machines that were used to take care of patients. They were the machines that our Echo machines are connected to, and so we had to re-image all those machines overnight so that we could actually do business the next day. So clicking on nefarious emails are a dangerous thing to do. But again, what happens with phishing, or what we call more broadly social engineering, is not glamorous stuff. Have any of you heard of Kevin Mitnick? If you're interested in this stuff, these are interesting books to read. But Kevin Mitnick was one of the most wanted hackers in the world, cost his victims over $300 million. And his technique was dumpster diving. So he would basically go to your house or your business, steal your trash, and then look through your trash to try to get clues on what your passwords might be, what your secrets might be, and then use those in order to compromise systems. Kevin lived in Raleigh, got arrested by the FBI in Raleigh, and then went to federal prison, got released, and then started this thing called Global Ghost Scheme Consulting, where basically he's now a white hat hacker trying to tell companies what their vulnerabilities are. So as a company, you can hire him, and he will try to hack into you. And he has a 100% success rate. He's never had a company that he couldn't hack into. Most recently, he hacked what's called an air gap system, where it's kind of like Mission Impossible. You have a big white room with a computer in the middle of the room. It's not connected to anything. All your secret stuff is on that. There's like air vaults and doors between that. And to get any data off of it, you have to go in the room with a memory key, physically take it off. He hacked one of those. And so using a hack that's called Brutal Kangaroo, if any of you are interested in reading about it. But he has had a 100% success rate using very simple techniques for the most part. His role is CHO, Chief Hacking Officer, which is kind of a cool title to have. So on the phishing side, be aware of suspicious emails, be aware of suspicious texts and suspicious phone calls. A lot of people don't realize this, but I have a team of folks who monitor this email address. And so people send me stuff all the time. Jeff, this email looks really, really bad. And they send it to my inbox. And the first thing I do is forward it to security@duke.edu, which you all can do. We don't care if we have a really high, false negative rate for these things. We want to make sure that we're catching these things. So just, you get an email, you're not quite sure about it, don't click on it, just forward it to security.duke.edu. You'll hear back from our folks, and they'll tell you whether or not it's something you need to be concerned about. The good news is, if it is a bad email, we'll block it at our firewall so other people can't click on it. We know who clicks on these things. And so oftentimes what we'll do is we'll get a bad email like this, we'll block it, then we'll go back and look at who clicked on it. Then I got to hunt down these 10 people in order to make sure that they didn't have some compromise on their machine. So the sooner we can get the email, the sooner we can block it, the fewer people will click on it, and we can do more to prevent things. Don't forward your Duke email outside of Duke. I mean, I know people do it, just don't do it. Outlook's not that bad. I have friends at other institutions that use Gmail. They wish they had Outlook. And then we have folks who use Outlook here who wish they were using Gmail. It's our institutional email. When you're here at work, just use Outlook. It protects the place. If you click something by accident and you have that oh crap moment where the skull and crossbones comes up or something, don't just close the computer and run away. Let us know about that. Because we really do want to prevent these things from propagating. And then be aware that Word documents, PDF files can also be infected. One of the worst, where we actually went above the 30% click rate, was an email that came out, and I don't know who in the room may have gotten it, but it went out to like leadership managers, directors, and it basically said there's a major security incident going on at Duke. Details are found in this PDF. Like, everybody clicked on that. and it was an infected PDF file. So those sorts of things can happen as well. When you get that thing in Word or Excel that says, do you want to enable macros? The answer is almost always no, because that's how they execute code in Word and Excel documents. Okay, moving on. Ransomware. Ransomware is bad stuff. And this is an example of what one looks like. So you click on a bad link. Next thing you know, you get a black, menacing-looking screen like this. And it basically says, you're the victim of ransomware. Your private files are being encrypted. Transfer 47 Bitcoins to us, or we're going to destroy all your stuff. That's basically what it says. Now, Bitcoins, everyone who's been following these things, they used to be worth next to nothing. And then they jumped up to like $20,000 a Bitcoin a couple of months ago. They've settled in around $8,000 a Bitcoin. But typical ransomware for one computer might be 40 or 50 Bitcoins. That's like $400,000. And so health systems across the country have had to work with cyber insurance carriers who have ways to procure Bitcoins in case you ever get in a situation. And so these insurance carriers now have Bitcoin accounts, because you can imagine that depending on the price of Bitcoin, it could cost a whole lot to get some Bitcoins if you really needed them. So that's a service that almost all the cyber insurance carriers have. Now, whether or not you pay the Bitcoin is a matter of institutional policy, and I think those vary from institution to institution. But these guys are pretty sophisticated. Often they'll have a link in here that says, hey, if you have trouble getting Bitcoins, just have your CFO call our help desk. We'll help you get them. And then you can pay our ransom. And then my favorite is when they have the link that says, join our affiliate program. Just put a little USB key into the machine. We'll put our ransomware on there. And then anything that you infect, whatever we collect from that, we'll give you 30%. So it's sort of like spreading the ransomware goodness. This is the WannaCry attack. So this is what our colleagues in the UK saw. This one I like because it had this menacing timer here. So basically same deal. We encrypted everything. It basically just says the ransom amount is going to be raised in 2 days, 23 hours, and we're going to blow up all your files in 6 days, 23 hours. And so you can get in on like the early bird deal if you pay it early on. Otherwise, they raise the ransom, and if you don't pay it, then they just destroy all your data. And they give you the link. That's how you pay. If anyone's ever used Bitcoin, they give you their Bitcoin public key, and then you would transfer the money to that public key. And theoretically, they would give you a decryption key, which in many cases they don't. They just take your money and then let your files be destroyed. And that's why a lot of sites would say don't pay the ransom, because your chances of getting a real key are pretty limited. So the National Health Service, this is from the New England Journal of Medicine. And what they did was not report on how WannaCry happened or technically what WannaCry was. They focused on what did this mean for boots on the ground doctors in the NHS when they were all encrypted. So NHS entered the weekend, countless elective operations were canceled, ambulances were diverted, patients were urged to stay away. However much they pretend patient safety is unaffected, it's not true, said a junior doctor in London. At one of the capital's biggest hospitals, automated refrigerators used for dispensing blood were shut down. We couldn't do surgery safely. Another hospital shut down trauma, stroke, heart attack centers. So it was a very real impact when this happened. They also published in this article something that I'm sure the Prime Minister loved. The British press discovered that the National Health Service IT systems were particularly vulnerable because they were using Windows XP. And the IT folks had put together a proposal for the Prime Minister. It's going to cost £7 million, £5.5 million, $7 million to do ongoing support for the outdated Windows XP operating system. And they chose not to pay that, not to protect the systems, which is what made them vulnerable and why some of this happened. But why it really happened is because your federal government and the NSA and the CIA Information Operations Center learned about a whole bunch of vulnerabilities in a whole bunch of operating systems. Vulnerabilities in Apple, vulnerabilities in Microsoft, vulnerabilities in mobile devices, Samsung TVs, etc. rather than reporting these to the vendors to close those vulnerabilities, we held on to those vulnerabilities to use against our enemies. But they got leaked. And Julian Assange published those NSA secrets on something called WikiLeaks. You'll know what WikiLeaks is? And so there's this thing on WikiLeaks that y'all can go look at today. Brutal Kangaroo is on there. And they publish these onto WikiLeaks, and it's this thing called Vault 7. So Vault 7 are the CIA hacking tools. They're all categorized and directorized, and they're available for anyone to download. And so WannaCry happened because some, we believe, North Korean hackers called the Shadow Brokers downloaded a CIA-created hack called Eternal Blue and then used it to infect all these machines in the UK. And they continue to post new stuff to the Vault 7 hacks. There's like 10% of the hacks that they actually have are posted for the public. And so every couple of weeks I throw some stuff out there just to make life interesting for me and others who do what we do. Shadow Brokers stole the Eternal Blue hack and then used the Eternal Blue hack to shut down the UK. So the way it works is this vulnerability, it's in something called Samba server. So Samba is a way that you do file sharing in Windows, and it uses a particular port. I think it's like 445. So Eternal Blue opens up this port and makes it available to a hacker. Then they install some malware into that open port called Double Pulsar, which gives the hackers command and control of that box. And then they run a malicious payload using Double Pulsar, which encrypts the machine with WannaCry. And that's what happened in the UK, and it spread to hundreds of thousands of machines in no time, spread across the globe in 24 hours, because it was jumping machine to machine to machine through these vulnerable ports. WannaCry is doing its thing and just encrypting like a virus. But there was this like 20-year-old security researcher who, when he was looking at the WannaCry code, saw a line in there that basically said, there's a website called like WannaCryStop.com, not quite that simple, but like that. And it keeps looking for that website, but that website doesn't exist. So this security investigator just went to some like GoDaddy analog and set up a blank website called WannaCryStop.com. And when he did it, all the WannaCry stopped. So there was a kill switch built into the virus that basically said, if this website exists, stop the spread. And if it doesn't exist, just keep propagating and spread to everyone. And most security researchers think that this would have been billions of machines if it had kept on going and this thing wasn't stumbled upon and they actually spun up that website. That gives you an idea of the spread of this. So this started in the Ukraine and in Europe, and 24 hours later, that's the spread of WannaCry. And this may seem like an overseas, distant, not Duke kind of deal, but in actuality, this actually just happened to First Health Carolinas. So if you go out to Pinehurst, more regional hospital, 600-bed hospital, a couple of months ago, the entire thing was encrypted. All 500 of their beds, 100-plus ambulatory clinics with the same virus in our state. So here at Duke, we had 400-plus attempted infections that are semantic antivirus blocked. We had 96% of our computers had already been patched and weren't using outdated operating systems. We increased that to 99% within a week. We had a problem with biomedical devices. And this is one of the reasons why folks think I'm giving them a hard time when they want to bring a new biomedical device in from the outside, but we really want to standardize on some vendors so that when something like this happens, we can call the president of Philips and say, you got to patch your devices. That's harder to do when you have a ton of different device manufacturers out there, some of whom don't have the ability to patch these things that quickly. This is just the news article about First Health Carolinas. This just happened like in November, December timeframe of this past year. So if you see unusual emails with links or attachments, if you see inaccessible files on your computer, weird error messages popping up, countdowns, skull and crossbones sort of stuff, just know that once it runs on your machine, it can spread laterally to other machines, and that's why we want to know about them quickly. And again, any concerns, email security@duke.edu. If you can't get into your computer, do it on your iPhone. Okay, advanced persistent threats. So this is what keeps me up most at night. Advanced persistent threats are sophisticated adversaries. They're usually nation-state actors. North Korea, China, Russia are the three that we see most often, but it could be any number of other nation-state actors. They're persistent, so these are not folks who come in guns blazing and try to steal something. These are folks who kind of creep in the dead of night, get a couple of footholds, then go dormant for months, then pop back up, try to get a little bit more data, then go dormant for a couple of months, and they're very hard to detect, and you have to be actively looking for them. And they're trying to gain strategic advantage by stealing sensitive data, specifically research data. Lots of advanced persistent threats in the news. Equifax, Yahoo, Penn State shut down its entire internet in the engineering department, School of Engineering, for adversaries that were on their network for years, and they didn't know about it until the FBI called them and told them, we're seeing traffic that's suggestive of these guys being on your network. Anthem, Primera, Excelis, the Office for Personnel Management, this is the U.S. government, 21 million employee and contractor records. So you're seeing many of these in the news now. One of the most notorious ones is something called APT1. And Mandiant, which is a cybersecurity firm, wrote a white paper on APT1 back in 2013 because they were so concerned about this, they felt they had to share this beyond just their kind of corporate intellectual property. It's based in Shanghai. That's their office building in Shanghai. Staffed by hundreds, probably thousands of military-employed hackers. They've attacked 141 companies in 20 industries over 7 years. The typical duration of the attack is 356 days, so nearly a year that they're spending trying to get into a site. The maximum duration reported in the Mandiant report, 4 years, 10 months, although we know now that some of them last even longer than that. And we've identified at least 20, probably more like 30 now, other APT groups in other countries around the world who fit a similar sort of profile. This is a military-run operation, PLA Unit 61398, and it's a 9-to-5 job. I mean, these folks come in, sit down, hack for 8 hours, and then go home to their families. And so the hacks generally happen. It's a 12-hour time difference from here, so it's not convenient for us because this is a 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. sort of deal. But that's when they are most active. They're highly skilled professionals. They have unique tools and techniques. They have lots of compute power. And you think about the things that we think keep us safe. So we did an exercise here. We have an 8-character password at Duke. We change it every 6 months. It requires a capital letter, special character, number, and an alphanumeric character. Today, with John the Ripper, which you can download off the internet, you could probably hack that password in less than 5 minutes. You start throwing farms of GPUs at these things in a military-run operation, you can probably create rainbow tables for 14-character passwords that then it's just a matter of looking up the hash and figuring out what the password is. So that's why things like multi-factor authentication and these kinds of things are so important, because passwords will not keep you safe. And I always encourage people, on your Gmail account, activate your multi-factor authentication. I do it for everything. I do it for my kid's Xbox account, for everything, because passwords are not going to keep you safe in this sort of compute environment. So this is how APT organizations typically run. So they compromise the organization. They might do it through phishing. Maybe you click on a bad email. But in this case, nothing horrible happens. A window pops up. It's blank. Like, you don't make much of it. You close it and delete the email. But now they have a foothold in your organization. They try to establish command and control, and they use something called a RAT, Remote Access Trojan, which is a trigger point that they can connect with in the future and get command and control, command line abilities in your organization. They escalate privileges, so maybe they have a single user account, now they're looking for an administrator account. Then they scan the network, they look for vulnerable hosts on the network. And again, we might have 99% of our systems patched, but when you run a network scan, it pretty quickly tells you which ones are not patched, and those are the ones they go after. So you got to be perfect, because if you're not perfect, they're going to find it, and that's what they're going to exploit. They compromise more systems, they maintain a presence, they drop a few more rats in different places so that if you find that rat, they have another one they can pop into after they wait for 6 months and do nothing. And use this to sort of perpetuate until they're actually able to conduct whatever mission they have, steal whatever data they want to steal, and then exfiltrate it. And by the way, when they exfiltrate it, they just don't like upload a terabyte of data overnight back to wherever the home base is. They kind of trickle it out over months and months and months, so you really don't notice that it's leaving the organization. And then Internet of Things. This is the last one we're going to talk about, but I'm sure you've noticed this now. Internet connectivity is not just reserved to laptops and iPhones anymore. It scales and Fitbits, and I mean, I have light bulbs that'll change color with my iPhone. They're all connecting to your network. And I can guarantee you that a light bulb does not have the same amount of security built into it as your laptop or your iPhone. And so IoT devices are becoming a huge thing. Numbers are expected to grow to as many as 30 billion of these devices by 2020. And that doesn't include computers, tablets, or smartphones. So we're going to have 30 billion things from small little companies connected to our networks. It could be the digital scale that you use, could be your blood pressure cuff, could be your light bulb in your house, connected to your network. And I guarantee you those light bulbs are not being patched. And we're going to have 30 billion of them on our network, on your home networks, on our institutional networks. One of these was hacked a couple of years ago. There were these Philips smart bulbs. You may have seen them in Home Depot. And these hackers, just to make a point, flew a drone up to an office building that was supposed to be the office building of the future and had every light bulb in the building blink SOS until people figured out what it was and what had actually happened. And they did that through a vulnerability in the light bulb. But we deal with much higher stakes things. We deal with biomedical devices. In DCRI, DHTS, Duke Health, we're always looking for the next cool insulin pump, the next cool implantable defibrillator that we can use on our patients. These things are also hackable. Now what you hear from the manufacturers of these devices is, don't worry about it, CIO. These are proprietary interfaces. Like, no one could figure this out. They could figure them out. And they do figure them out. They also say, well, applying any patches to our implantable biomedical devices is going to mess up all of our FDA validation. And so we can't touch these things, but don't worry, they're proprietary, you don't need to worry about them. Both of those things are false. So proprietary doesn't mean safe, and there is no FDA regulation that says that vendors of biomedical devices should not be patching those devices on a regular cadence. And those are the kinds of things that we worry about before we bring things into the environment, because we don't want to have devices that are coming from vendors who maybe don't have the ability to patch those on a regular basis. So this guy, Barnaby Jack, any of you ever heard of Barnaby Jack? So Barnaby Jack is a hacker. He says a hacker for the good, who has done several things, but most recently, he was going to go to the Black Hat Convention, which is a big convention in Las Vegas every year where they show security vulnerabilities and show a vulnerability in pacemakers, where he could effectively deliver an 830 volt deadly shock remotely to an implantable pacemaker from a laptop 50 feet away. The prior year, he was able to give lethal doses of insulin to patients with insulin pumps from 300 feet away. So there's an interesting story that came out about Barnaby Jack, because the night before he was supposed to give this presentation at the Black Hat Convention, he was found dead in his hotel room. And there's lots of conspiracy theories on the internet about why and when that happened. But he was a guy who was trying to make device manufacturers aware of the harm that could come from their devices if they don't take security seriously. So this is a little news clip about Barnaby Jack right after he died.
The hacker community is mourning the loss of one of its brightest. Barnaby Jack died Thursday morning at the age of 36. The San Francisco Medical Examiner's Office did not provide details on the circumstances surrounding his death. Barnaby was known for hacking into small devices and exposing their security vulnerabilities. He was beloved by many in the hacking community. Barnaby claimed international fame during a hacking conference dubbed the Black Hat Convention, where in a presentation he hacked an ATM, forcing it to continuously spit out bills. He called this attack jackpot, and at this year's Black Hat convention, just a week away, Jack was prepared to give another monumental presentation, this time about the security of wireless medical devices. The Guardian reports last year, Jack had exposed a security flaw in insulin pumps that could be made to dispense a fatal dose by a hacker 300 feet away. This year's presentation was slated to discuss a new vulnerability in wireless pacemakers and defibrillators. Jack reported both flaws to the FDA, pushing some medical companies to review the security of their devices. In an interview with BBC, Jack talked about his work with medical devices, saying, "My purpose was not to allow anyone to be harmed by this. Hopefully it will promote some change in these companies and get some meaningful security in these devices." News of Jack's death has spread throughout the Twitter sphere, with friends of his expressing their love. Jack's wife expressed her gratitude for all the well wishes, saying, "So humbled by the social media flood of people that loved Barnaby Jack. Thank you all so much for your kind words." The Black Hat Convention will not replace Jack's presentation, but will instead leave the time open to commemorate his life and work. For Newsy, I'm Jamal Andrews. Multiple sources, a broader view.
So these sort of network-enabled devices are something of concern, and I just want to make you aware of them because it's something that we're dealing with on a regular basis now. So I think the takeaway here is that Internet of Things devices are becoming more and more common. We often don't think twice before we connect one of these to our home network or our work network. And we have to consider the patient safety aspects of these things. And Duke is trying to leverage its position to really work with vendors to make sure these get patched appropriately before we put them in our environment. But it sometimes means that we are not as quick and as nimble as we'd like to be when doing new and innovative things. So lots of things going on in our information security program. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I do want to mention that you should all be on our mobile device manager platform now. This is what we call AirWatch on your iPhones. And AirWatch has been a long and challenging practice program to get live across the organization. But we have it up and running now. And basically, if you want to use Duke resources on your iPhone, you need to be on AirWatch. If you're not on AirWatch, over time, you're going to see access to things go away. You won't be able to access email through your native client. You won't be able to connect to our network the way you do today. You won't be able to access MeisterCare or any of the MeisterCare iPhone apps, and on and on. So the general idea is we need to have some controls in place to understand what's on our network so that if one of them gets compromised, we can see it and filter it off the network before it impacts other devices. And this is just sort of a grid to tell you if you need AirWatch or not, but I think the bottom line is if you have a Duke-owned device, you need AirWatch. If it's personal, you ask yourself these questions. Do I need to connect to the network? Do I need Duke Health apps like Haiku, Canto, VPN for the library, Jabber? And then do you want to use your device's native email client? If you say yes to any of these, you need to be on AirWatch or else your access is going to be interrupted. And then more recently, we're initiating something called network access control. So today, it's pretty easy to go to Best Buy or the Apple Store, buy a computer connected to our network. In the future, you won't be able to do that. What you're going to need to do is have some baseline security software on your laptop. That will probably be something like BigFix, which inventories laptops for us, and some antivirus software like the CrowdStrike agent that would need to be on the laptop. And so when you try to connect that to the network, what's going to happen once we turn this on is it'll say, do you have antivirus software and BigFix on your laptop? If it's yes, we let you on the network. If it's no, we kick you onto a guest network where you wouldn't have access to the resources on the rest of it. I wish we didn't have to do these things. I mean, this is a huge headache to have to roll out there. But I hope after this talk today you understand we live in a world where we can't ignore these sorts of things anymore. And MDM and network access control are two areas where we are probably behind other academic institutions. And so we need to catch up in those areas. A lot of other areas where I think we're ahead, but MDM, for example, was out there, Stanford, Harvard, Hopkins, all have MDM. Duke did not, so there was a real push to move towards that. Network access control is less pervasive, but certainly something that we need to do relatively quickly. So in the next year, we'll be turning that on as well. And so I think the key takeaway from today is that hacking is ubiquitous. You need to be aware of social engineering. You need to be aware of drive-by downloads on websites. We actually had a ransomware attack in one of the basic science labs where someone went to the website for Crabtree Valley Mall, clicked on a link on the website, and it encrypted all the microscopes in the lab. So things you click on, even through your internet browser, if your browser's not patched, can also be a delivery mechanism for these. Hacked web servers continue to be a challenge. I know people want to be able to spin up web servers on their own machine, want to be able to use whatever cloud-based provider they want to host it in Amazon or Liquid Web or any of these sorts of things. It's not safe to do that. And we have to have some controls to make sure we're patching these sorts of things so that they're not vulnerable. So I think we all need to work to make Duke more secure. You should think before clicking on stuff. Use good passwords. The more complex, the longer they are, the better off you are. Shorter ones are imminently crackable. I try to encourage people to use passphrases. Think of a little sentence with spaces and capitals and punctuation and make that your password. Use multi-factor authentication. Always encrypt your laptop and your storage. Apply patches whenever they're available. Adhere to the security standards. Report anything you're worried about to security@duke.edu. And help us make other folks aware of some of the things. Hopefully you'll take one or two things out of what we talked about today and help others understand why we're talking about this and why this is so important. So that's all I have for today, but I have a couple of minutes left if there's any questions. Stunned silence.
First of all, excellent presentation. You talked a lot about external threats, and that's obviously a huge part of this. I was curious whether you have, along with the exponential increase in external threats, have you seen a corresponding increase in internal vulnerabilities? Because obviously a big part of the security is also securing things from the inside, as you said.
Yeah.
You know, the biggest threat is sort of people, right? Have you seen any corresponding uptick in internal threats, and if so, what's being done about it?
Well, so I think internal espionage and internal threats are always something that we try to pay attention to. It's hard to say if there's an uptick or not, and the reason why is we weren't looking at a per device level before. Okay, we would look for network anomalies, traffic anomalies, access logs, these kinds of things, but we weren't looking at a per device level. We are now. So if you have a device connected to our network, we're looking, and so what we'll see is, you know, hey, this guy over in, I'll pick on DCRI, is, you know, connecting his laptop to the dark web. We can see that. Or, you know, a Tor exit node just popped up in this area, we can see that. Or ransomware just ran on this machine, we can see that. And so we are definitely seeing more in the way of internal vulnerabilities and threats, but we're also looking in a way that we never looked before. So I don't have a good baseline to know whether it's going up or not. It's significant. Other questions? All right. Thanks, everyone.